Hello, everyone, and welcome to what is our first YouTube Q&A that we have done here on the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We'll have this up on YouTube as well. I'll push the audio feed out as I normally do, but I wanted to do something a little bit different. A couple people were asking about doing a Q&A and hearing from, me as well as other guests who I might want to have on about different questions that they had about coaching, about their team, just about a variety of topics. And I was able to accrue about 10 different questions. And I really like these ones because they kind of span different topics related to playing and relating to coaching. And I did not want to do this episode alone. I did not want to just speak for however long by myself. So I am very happy to have a guest with me. She was actually on episode 34 about developing leaders. Coach Shelby Gliebe is with me. Coach, how are things? How have things been?
Good. I mean, we're playing, which is more than a lot of people can say. So,
Yeah,
just kind of
it
taking it
is.
day by day.
Yeah, it's really interesting to just think across the country. You have coaches like myself who haven't really done anything, and you have coaches who are just, going on like normal. And then you have the ones I feel really bad for, the ones who are kind of doing the stop, start sort of thing. They have a game, then
Yep.
things get shut down for 2 weeks. It's crazy. It's all over the place for sure. But um, I'm very happy that we got some questions that people submitted. Have some through Twitter, have some through some other media platforms as well. And we're just going to hit these questions and we'll give our thoughts and our insights on them. And hopefully, to all of you watching or listening, this is beneficial to you. So, we're going to go ahead and get started with this first question here. So, this question was submitted by Coach Olson at Lebanon High School out in Oregon. He asked, what are three things that you would tell an assistant coach that they need to do to be a better assistant? So, Coach, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. What are three things that you would tell an assistant coach that they would need to do?
The first one would probably be, and when you're looking for an assistant coach, I would say someone to be loyal.
Mm,
Loyal to you, to the program. You don't need, you know, parents and stuff, comfortable with the assistant coach, and then they're not really, your assistant coach isn't bought into what you're doing, so they're kind of, fueling the gossip behind your back or whatever. So I would definitely say to be loyal. um, the second one would be, um, as they have bought into what you're doing, I would say to, um, oh shoot, what was I gonna say? Like, um, gosh, I'm losing my train of thought like crazy right now.
No, no, you're good. The loyalty part is actually interesting though. Like, you kind of want to have them bought in to like what you're doing. I think we've all had situations. That was actually one that I put where you have like the assistant coach who like thinks that they know more than the head coach maybe, or they have their own like different like, I don't want to say agenda, but maybe agenda is the right word that they have.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
then what ends up happening is they might be telling the players things that like end up
Yep.
undermining what you as a coach are
What?
trying to
Yep.
do. And next thing you know,
Absolutely.
you have a divided program and it's like, all right, well, coach, so and so said this and you're saying this. It's like, wait, how do we get
Yep.
our wires crossed? I thought we were
Yep.
on the same page when our staff was talking to one another, right?
Yep.
So you
Yep.
had loyalty.
Yep.
You lost track on another one. Was
Yeah,
there another
I
one
got it
that you
now.
had? Okay.
Basically, just to, as we set the expectations for how we want the girls to, carry themselves on and off the floor, I've even had to have conversations with, a couple of my assistant coaches, like, hey, make sure you're on time, or make sure you're early. We can't
Uh-oh.
tell the girls to be early or be on time if, you're not, so probably just mirroring the expectations that we want for the program, and, behaving like that, setting those expectations, and, you got to walk the walk if you're going to talk the talk. So that's kind of a big one in our program.
I
Um,
got to ask, how do you have those conversations with your assistants? I feel like that's a very awkward conversation to have where you're like, hey, coach, I need you to show up on time. Does that happen like often?
it
I hope
hasn't,
not.
just once or twice where it's like, oh yeah, I forgot to mess, or I forgot to call you or text you and just let you know I was running a couple minutes
Hmm.
late. Um,
So I know
and sometimes,
punctuality is big for you. I remember that.
yes, yes. And sometimes I do kind of have a hard time of, um, like I said in the podcast, sometimes I have to kind of take a second before I respond, because I'll just kind of be blunt, like, why are you late? Like, what's going on? But, it's just like, hey, I always preface it with, if we're going to tell the girls they have to be on time and we set these expectations for them, that also means that we're
Mhm.
expected to do the exact same thing. So I kind of lay it out there, like, these are the expectations that we've set for the girls. We also have to embody those as well. So
Mhm.
doesn't make it as awkward. I mean, it is an awkward conversation because, sometimes confrontation can be awkward, but it's always well received when I preface it with that. So
Yeah, I think that it's always easier when you're coaches and you yourself are going to practice the same things that you want your
mhm,
players to do. It's a lot easier for players to be like, okay, well, obviously it's important for me to do this. Look, all the coaches do it as well, right? And so it's a lot easier that way. So of the ones that I put here, the first one that I put, and this actually came from an episode that I did earlier with, I think it was Coach Edwards. We had a whole episode that was dedicated to being an assistant coach. And one of the things was for an assistant coach, I think it's really important for whoever the head coach is to know what is that assistant coach's aspirations, like what are
mhm,
you doing this job for?
yep,
Because if that assistant coach is like doing it and all they want to do is be an assistant coach, that's fine. Because then I think what you'll maybe give them in terms of responsibility or things to do might be a little different. But if you
yep,
have an assistant coach like on your staff, I don't know if you do, who has aspirations to be a head coach, you might treat them a little bit differently. You might give them more responsibilities or kind of challenge them in different ways and trying
yep,
to, in a way, prepare them. Because I think as a head coach, something that is really cool is to see like your assistants like become their own
one,
coaches and
yeah,
become head coaches, right? So I
yeah,
think it's really important for like assistant coaches and head coaches to kind of have that conversation of like, hey, like to be blunt, what are you doing here? Like, what is your purpose
yeah,
here? And like, what do you want to do? And what level of responsibility do you want to take on? I've talked to a couple of coaches who the assistant coaches, they're great individuals, but they're really busy and they don't have a lot of time to do a lot of stuff. And
yep,
it just is what it
yep,
is. But others who are just like, hey, I'm just out of college, I'm taking this job, like I want to like coach UConn one day, you know what I mean? And like,
right,
okay,
yeah,
well, here's all this film, go do all this and let's see what we got. So that
yep,
was my first one. And then the second one I had kind of went with what you said about it has to be kind of a united front that
yep,
I may not agree necessarily with, like just using you as an example of something that you want to do, but
mhm,
in front of the players, I will,
yep,
because I think that creates a lot of issues if
mhm,
players know that like, oh, like, Coach Hernandez doesn't agree with like Coach Gliebe's doing, oh, there's issue there. There's
yeah,
a problem there. Cause players drama, ooh, they'll love to attach themselves
oh
to
yeah,
that.
oh yeah,
I think that is super important. And then I think for assistants, what they would really need to do is really learn what that head coach's like system is and try and learn it like inside and out. Like
yep,
you probably should be, no, you definitely should be an authority on that system. So like just throw something out to me, coach. I don't know, an offensive, a defensive system that you like or that you run. What's something that you run?
read and react. Big
So
fan
like
of read and react.
if I'm your assistant, I should know read and react. I should like have that down to where
Yep,
if one of your players were to talk to me, I could be like, oh yeah, you do this, you do this, you do that. Like,
yep,
boom, I got
yep,
it.
absolutely,
Otherwise, then I can't help you when you're in, like, say you're in a game and you're focusing on your coaching and then you take a player out
yep,
and then this player's like, coach, like, oh, I thought what do I do here? And I'm just like, I don't know, because I never
yeah,
learned read and react.
yeah,
So I think
right,
that's super important and it takes time. And you might have to, if you get a new head coach, right, you might have to learn a whole new system that year. Well,
yeah,
yeah, because if you're a JV
absolutely,
coach, right, your responsibility should be getting them ready for varsity. So I'm just
exactly.
curious, coach, is at your lower levels, do they run the same? Do they run and read and react at like freshman level, JV level?
Well, we actually, as a program, that's
Hmm.
what I want it to eventually be.
Hmm.
Right now, we are struggling with the read and react. So
At the
right
varsity
now,
level?
yes.
Okay.
Um, uh, I guess, not to take any credit away from them, but I guess I was, they've kind of gotten away with being athletic and,
Hmm.
having a little bit of skill.
Sure.
Yeah. So they don't actually know how to play and read and react. um, which is the whole offense. So we actually kind of had to go back and do more like broken down offensive sets. So like right now we've just kind of been running the straight flex motion, you know, uh, down screen across, just try to keep it simple. So yeah, eventually, yes, I would want everybody to be running it, at least some form of it, especially in the younger levels. So then, when they move up, they can just kind of go into it.
Sure.
But yeah, right now that's kind of went on the back burner just
Are you doing, or is your younger or lower levels kind of doing those same sets? Is it kind of like a progression, or are you not too worried about what they're doing at the lower levels?
right. I want to get to the point where we are all on the same page.
Sure.
Right now they're actually not playing. So our middle
Oh,
school
well,
and
there you go.
lower is not playing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So right now, no, we're not really on the
Hmm.
same page at all. And in previous years, I don't think there's really been that, program wide, system wide.
Wasn't even a
Um,
book.
yes. Yeah. So, we're just kind of all sporadic right now, but hopefully as we move into the spring and the summer and I'm
Hmm.
able to actually do stuff with them, we can get more on the same page as far as, especially expectations and things like that. So,
Sure. Yeah, this is it's definitely a hard year to kind of try and implement all these concrete things that
yeah.
that you're going to use.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, so in general, like just know the system, like know what your head coach is doing. Learn, ask
Yeah.
questions too. Like please,
Yeah.
please
Yeah.
ask questions. Absolutely. Alrighty, awesome. So second question that we have here. And you, I believe, are definitely an authority on this one as somebody who played at the collegiate level. What is the number one thing, if there is one, what is the number one thing in terms of body language that college or university coaches watch for when scouting a prospect? So I'll start with you. I'm not sure if it's something you have personal experience with as a player or just things that you've noticed coaching. Go ahead, coach.
I would say probably the biggest thing is how you're going to react to a situation. Um, if a teammate misses one of your passes, are you going to blame it on your teammate? If you get taken out of the game, how are you going to go sit on the bench? Are you going to slouch in your chair, cross your legs, look super disengaged? If your teammate takes a charge, are you the first one there to high five them, pick them back up? I would say, because that's a big thing for me as far as, body language. I would just, any given situation that happens in a game, even if refs are bad, no offense, but most of the time, you're always going to think the refs are bad. I mean,
Yeah.
um, so, how are they going to react to bad refs? So I would say just how they react to any given situation throughout the course of a game. That would be what I would look for.
Was that anything when you were playing that you even like thought about or had somebody like bring to your attention your body language, or was it not something you had to really think too much about?
Probably in high school. I mean, I was, yeah, I was the better one on the team. So, a lot of times I kind of had that selfish mindset. So, if a girl missed a pass or something, I'm sure I rolled my eyes and, did whatever. And I was, big into slapping things, which, so dumb. But so I did kind of, once I got to college, have to kind of take a step back and be like, dang, like the way you carry yourself around out here isn't the greatest. So I did have to start paying more attention to how I would react to a situation or, whatever. So
Mm. I think that it's it's such a fine balance between like being competitive and you get like frustrated
mm,
versus like being disrespectful almost, or just like making it like too much about yourself or drawing too much attention on yourself. Like it's probably a
yeah,
really hard balance. And I know you're a real competitive person, so
yeah,
you just react, right? You're just like
yes,
frustrated at that turnover, frustrated
yeah,
at whatever that missed shot was. Yeah, I get that.
yeah,
I think just kind of adding on to that, it's really like for body language, and we actually talked about this in our episode, is like when there's dead ball situations or like timeouts, or there's some break in the action, like are players even looking at you? Like if you
yeah,
speak as a player, like does anyone pay attention? Does anyone notice? Do people look at you and leadership, and do they look at you for like guidance on what to do? So in terms of body language, like what are you as a player doing to either like get your team like excited or to get them refocused, or just like what positivity like are you bringing? Because like if you're on the bench, right? Like what are you doing on the bench to like be
Yep.
engaged and get everybody else engaged? Or like if there's a bad call that goes against your way, like what are you doing to just kind of get everybody like going and get everybody ready? And then it's hard. And I think that, you know, we talked about this, like developing that. I think that one of the, I don't know if it's a misconception, but I think that we just assume that like some players have it and some don't. And I don't think we realize as coaches that we can like teach good body language.
Yeah.
And like I
Yeah.
don't think a lot of our players even recognize like what their body language is saying or what it's conveying. Like
Hmm.
even I've been in situations where I've had a player who take them out and they sit there and they're so like upset because of a mistake that they did. They're not mad at anyone, but they sit there and they got their arms crossed and they look like they're going to stare a hole through the floor. And
Hmm.
I get it, but then like all the other players on the bench are like, oh man. And
Yeah.
it is, you know, like all of a sudden, like the energy on the bench is just like completely different because everyone's like,
Yes.
whoa, look at that. Like, whoa, she's
Yeah.
angry, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm maybe you've even been there too, where like something happens and you're just ready to go out. And so that's what I would say. And then I think just kind of with that is what, how do you react, you know, after that? Like you make a mistake on the court, like are you just like engaged and ready to go in the next play, or can you like, do you show it on your face? Do you like show it in your body language that you're still thinking about it or you're still frustrated? I think that that's hard too, you know, that next play mentality.
Yeah.
We would like to have it, right? But sometimes, you know, things stick with us a little bit.
Yeah.
So for
And I
sure.
don't know if you follow Kara Lawson, just kind of to build on that.
Mhm.
Kara Lawson, I don't know if she put it on her Twitter or if it was with Duke, but she said, in a game, when you think about body language or you think about making a mistake and then reacting based off that, like you score in a game because the other team made a mistake. So there's 150 possessions in a basketball game, and 150 times somebody is making a mistake.
Mhm.
So, in her, I don't know if it was pre-practice or pre-game speech, she was like, so like you can't dwell on one mistake because, that's how you score and that's how other teams score, is because there's at some point there's a breakdown in the defense or the offense or whatever, and there's a mistake made. So, you can't let one mistake, and I know that doesn't really go with body language, but it kind of does. Like you
Yeah,
can't
it
let
does.
one
Yeah.
mistake, dictate how the rest of the game and how the rest of your playing is going to go. So
Well, if you're watching like film on a player who like you might be thinking about recruiting and you're watching, you know, like film on them and you see the way that they react to a mistake and you know that like they're not engaged on that next play, like I think as a coach you're like, well, that player could be a liability then
yes, yep,
because I
yep,
don't know how they're going to react now on this next possession because they're still thinking about the prior one.
yep,
So, yeah,
yep.
no, for sure. I think it all kind of ties in like that. And I like that 150 mistakes. I mean, that is true. There's always
I
mistakes
know.
being made, right?
Yeah, I never thought of it like that. But I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's a tough pill to swallow to be thinking like, oh, there's all these mistakes happening. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
no, it is true. Absolutely. All right. So this next one, 2020. So what a year it's been, right? What a year 2020 has been. So this is actually from former guest here, Lucas Ramirez from Saguaro High School. Coach, how have you grown the most in the year 2020?
I would say that um, I have really done a lot of self-reflecting.
Mm,
I'm able to, you know, admit, and I've never been one to, think I know all the answers to every little thing.
hmm.
But especially this year in coaching, I've kind of taken the pressure on myself to figure everything out and asked the team questions, because since we didn't have, I took the job in the spring. So we didn't
Yeah.
have spring, we didn't have summer. Well, we had 6 practices over summer, and I think we got 4 in the fall, and then
Hmm.
we had 2 days of tryouts. So, I don't know the girls, and I
Right.
don't know how they're going to react in situations and game situations. Um, and even preparing for games, we watch film, have scouting reports. But pretty much like every week I'm saying, like, how do you want to prepare? Not I'm saying I'm not asking this every week, but like what we talked about this week was, how can we better prepare you for the game? Like,
Hmm.
what do you need more from us? Do you need more film sessions? Do you need more detailed scouting reports? So for me, especially with moving into a new position, I've really, just kind of taken a step back and being like, we don't have all the answers. And it's okay to ask questions, not only to, other coaches or admin or whoever, but also like the girls, like they're the
Hmm.
ones playing. So that's probably self-reflection and being able to kind of take a step back and be okay with not knowing everything. That's probably been the biggest way, especially as a coach.
So was there any like big like aha moment that you had with like your self-reflection? Was there something in particular when you're like, whoa, I never like thought of it this way, or oh, I want to definitely like improve this and do this differently than maybe I was doing before?
Yeah. I mean, I get, as a head coach, you kind of, um, I mean, you're supposed to have all the answers, that's what everybody
Perfect
looks at
world.
for. Yeah. Um, and I've done a lot better job as well. Um, in previous, I mean, last year in my coaching position, I had, you know, coaches that I had on staff that, I really didn't know.
Hmm.
I mean, I knew them well enough, but like sometimes I just would kind of not listen to what they were saying, which isn't good as a head coach. But sometimes I was like, oh, that's not right. But like this year, I've really tried to listen to everybody. And my assistant coaches, I tell them all the time, like, I don't know all the answers. We're learning, they're learning. Like, it's okay to, off court, like you said earlier, to call me out or say, hey, like, I understand why I just don't get it. Like, why are
Yeah.
we doing, how about we do it a different way? So just really, really just kind of taking the pressure off of myself to, be this end all be all answer. I know everything and we're going to be prepared as perfectly as possible. And
Hmm.
really just, I mean, just ask more questions, really.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a tricky situation where like as a head coach, you feel that everything that you do and every decision you make, it's gonna like come back at you, which I guess it will. Like
Yeah.
they're not gonna come after your assistant coach for like
Right.
something that happens. So that probably tends to make you like want to have control over everything because you know it all comes back to you.
Yeah.
But if you want to kind of go back to the first question, like for your program to work, like you want your staff to be like bought into. You want to have
Yeah.
them like feel like they're part of something and like,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, and that like their input, it might not always be used, but you
Yeah.
heard it and you accepted it. And it's tricky because it's like control person, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do
Yeah.
everything, but I
Well, yeah.
can't do everything because if you try to do everything, then you're going to be ineffective trying to hold all
Right.
those plates, right?
Yeah.
Um, for me, and this was a little bit of a different answer because I've had a couple people ask me this. And for those who don't know, like I'm a teacher and I've been virtual since March, and I'm relatively healthy. I have stable income. I have pretty much all of my boxes are checked. So for me, this pandemic has been like kind of like a wake up call to me about like, okay, you have all this time and you are very fortunate to be financially taken care of and you're healthy and everything's good.
Yeah.
So now what? Like, what are you going to do with this time? Like,
Yeah.
what are you going to have to show for yourself when this pandemic is over? When you had all this time, like, what are you going to do? And so what this year has actually made me do is just hold myself like more accountable. I think that you know, as this pandemic's gone on, you have stretches of days where like maybe you like don't really need to like leave your house and maybe you have all this free time and you have all this time available to you and it's really
Mhm.
easy to get like sucked into like wasting time pretty much and all of a sudden the day's all gone. And so it's like, well, if you want to get better at coaching, like look at all this time you have. Like, what are you doing with this time? Like,
Yeah.
okay, do this podcast, you know, read some books, go to some Zoom clinics. And I think that it's just made me like think more about like time and knowing that a year from now, when I'm hopefully like coaching as I normally am, like I'm not gonna have any time anymore. And I'll be
Yeah.
like, man, I almost missed 2020 when I had all this time and I was home all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to me, it's just like, hey, like hold yourself accountable and like use this time to like get better.
Yeah.
And hopefully I've done that. Hopefully it'll show in my coaching. I would like to know, but I haven't really been able to coach too much yet. But
Right.
I think, I don't know about you personally, coach, but I've been to a lot of like Zoom like clinics, seen all this stuff online. Like that's something I've taken away from it. Have you gone to many? Have you gone to any Zoom clinics or done any of those?
Yeah, I have. And we actually, I don't know, I would assume BSN Sports is like a nationwide thing. I'm not exactly sure.
Uh,
But they have, I guess it's weekly. Every once in a while, they'll have like some pretty big name people, and not just athletes, it'll be like maybe like a sports psychologist or something like that. So I do try to jump on those, as much as I can. Um, Fortunately, we are playing and stuff. So most
mhm.
of my time is watching film and watching our games and stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously before all of this, yes.
Yeah,
Um, but right now I haven't gone to a bunch just because we actually have been in season. So hopefully
sure.
we can continue.
Yeah, it's good in a way to not have time to do
Yeah.
all of those Zooms because you actually have your own stuff that you get to
Yeah.
focus on
Yeah.
for sure. But I think it's just been cool this year how much connection has been made between like coaches and how much stuff has
Uh-huh.
been available and all the networking and all like the Zoom clinics and all the stuff that's just out there. Um, as a coach told me earlier today, it's like you don't have to go to Las Vegas anymore to like
Right.
go to these
Yeah,
clinics. You can just hop on your computer. And so trying to
exactly.
look at some positives that way, definitely.
Yeah.
Great. So a lot of these next questions actually come from perspectives from players, which I think is really cool. So you can kind of get an idea about like maybe what your players are thinking and
Yeah.
the things that are kind of going through in their mind. So this question is about how do you encourage players that are lazy to put in more effort? So I know that this question was actually submitted by a player, but I think that there's actually two different ways you can kind of take it. Like think of it as a teammate and then think of it as a coach. So coach, go ahead. How do you encourage players that are lazy to put in more effort?
This is a big one. Or and a really good
It's very
one.
honest of you to say that too.
Um, let's see. I need to watch how I say some of these things. Um, Really, I saw a tweet one time that said, playing hard is a prereq. It should be, or, it was a coach that said it. So his tweet was like, playing hard is a prerequisite for our program. Like,
Mhm,
if you're not going to play hard or put in the effort, then you can't play.
mhm,
It's the same, you're in classes, you have to take, bio 100 to get to bio 200 or whatever. So it's like the prereq. Um, and effort is actually probably one of our biggest things now that we're dealing with our younger girls, our
mhm,
freshmen, some sophomores too. um, and it stems from the younger grades not having held them any accountable for anything. No expectations were set, so now we're trying to come in and break these habits mid-season. And I kicked them out of practice today, because
uh-oh.
yes, yes, um, because of the lack of effort. And it's one of those things that we have to keep telling them now. Like, for us, we are 5 weeks away from the end of our season. We have our tournament the first week of February, but we have 5 weeks. So at this point, we're going into January talking about effort and having to stop drills because of lack of effort. Like, it shouldn't even be a thing, and sometimes I just have to look at them like I'm just like mind boggled sometimes at like the things that we're still having to talk to you guys about.
So
Um,
what does that mean in like a practice? Are you talking about like not like finishing drills, not like going like 100% on them, like going for the motions? What does that like being lazy in like a practice setting mean for you?
for me, one of the big things is like transitioning from drill to drill.
Mm,
And transitioning from a drill to get your water bottle. Like, I mean, it hits a nerve when I see a girl walk in from drill to drill, or, she got her rebounds and she's passing it to the next girl. So then she's just going to walk to the end of the line. Like, it just shoots a nerve the wrong way with me. And I don't know. For us, effort, and a lot of times, the better players are the ones that give the effort. So for us, how we try to encourage, it's worked a little bit. We're still struggling, with some mindsets and things, but like, they play and they get recognized and this and this because they put in the effort, like, on court, they're putting in the effort to, put up some extra shots and stuff. So
Yeah.
like to get to where you hopefully want to be, which is on varsity, like effort is like you have to put in the effort. And it's not just in basketball, it's school, it's it's going to translate into real life and your jobs. Like if you don't put in effort and do what you're supposed to do, like you're not going to get,
Mm-hmm.
you can get fired.
Did your players, like, when this happened in this situation? I think you said it happened today. Did they get it? Like, how did they react? Did they like understand what was going on? Like, what was their body language like? Circling back to that, when you made that decision.
Yeah. Well, some of them, the upperclassmen are the ones, they get pretty bummed out because,
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones not really um doing it. I mean, they do. There's a few of them that kind of get, lazy at times too, but a lot of times it's our younger players. And um some of their body language is, they roll their eyes, but some of them are like, "Oh, okay, like she's serious."
Mm.
And I'll be honest, I told them, like, if you don't come tomorrow ready to go 100%, running hard, and for me, some people or some kids might not know what you're doing. But I'm big on asking questions. But like you can still sprint. Like you don't have to know what's going on to sprint down the
Sure.
floor,
Sure.
so that's where I have a hard time with some girls like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, okay, I understand, but like you can run from one end of the court to the other and sprint. You don't have to know, you don't really have to know
Mm-hmm.
how to do that.
Yeah.
So some of them were like, okay, she's serious. Some of them were like, ugh, of course we're, because of the JV, whatever. But hopefully tomorrow they come back ready to go. Otherwise, we're going to have some, serious conversations with some of the girls.
It's actually really funny, the example that you just said about like a player who would be like, "Oh, like so and so this is happening because of like JV." To me, I'd be like, "No, it's because of you." Like if you're an
Yeah.
upperclassman and we have these people on JV or like freshmen who are like jogging, like that's on you. Like how did it get to this point? Like it's not me
Yeah.
who should be the one necessarily like enforcing this. Like this is what are your standards? Like why do you tolerate this or accept
Yeah.
this? And I know that's a culture shock too, as well. I'm gonna have to follow up with you on that to see how that practice goes the next day. I think for me as a coach, if a player is worried about that, like how do I know like if a player is lazy because they're sitting next to me on the bench because they're not playing? Like that's how I know, because
Mhm.
I'd rather lose by 30 with players who are working hard rather than lose by like 5 with players who are lazy but have enough skill. Like it's all the same to me. It doesn't matter much to me, and like I think it comes to like what you value
Mhm.
as a coach. And this kind of goes back to what we just talked about, how you're like the head coach, everything kind of like comes at you. And so you might have faced a situation where like you're coaching and yeah, I'm gonna maybe I'm gonna lose this game by 30 to prove a point, and yeah, I'm gonna look bad and people are gonna be like, what is coach doing, like doesn't know anything. But I know that, yeah, these players aren't as skilled, but I know how hard they work, and that's what I stand for as a coach, and I need to be
Mhm.
able to go to sleep at night knowing I made the right decision.
Yeah.
And that's just going to be what it's going to be. And I think one of the hardest things for new coaches, and you can kind of speak to this, and since you are new in your position, is to almost like rip apart some of like the pre-established things because you just don't like where it was. And
Mhm.
that might mean, hope it doesn't mean that, but it might mean like getting rid of that senior who like just was there for all 4 years, but you're like, no, like this isn't what this program's going to be, sorry. And you just make those decisions, because if you don't and you like keep those players and they just dog it, like it's just going to infect your whole team, because those freshmen will see the way those seniors just sort of went through the motions, like, oh, that's all I got to do now. And
Yeah.
you know and I think that's difficult, but I think as a coach, you have to stand your ground. And I think the
Yeah.
lessons or the things that you stand for as a coach have to mean more than like, oh, I want to win this game, so yeah, these players don't try, they show up during games, so I'll play them. Like, is that really what you want?
Right. Right.
um
Exactly.
what about as a player? Like, did you ever have players, I'm sure you did, who were like just were dogging it or just who were lazy? And how did you react to those players who maybe were just kind of going through the motions?
Um,
Or maybe you didn't have any. I don't know.
well, yeah, we did. I would probably say just, I mean, sometimes, I mean, you can be positive and you can be encouraging, but sometimes like some people just really
But
need
how
you to
did
get
you respond to them?
sometimes you just kind of have to be a bee and like tell 'em to like, get your head out of your butt and freaking play, like
Hmm.
um and sometimes, at that point, a head coach wants that. And then, then your assistants can go to them and be like, hey, look, you know, and for me, one of the big things I've been saying recently is that like, I'm not as players, when you look at, if so and so gets on you, like they're not coming at you, they're not mad. Cause we have some
Sure.
girls that they just get in their feelings. They take everything super personal. So, I've had to tell them multiple times, they're not coming at you, they're not being mean. They're just passionate about what is happening. So, if you're not running hard and this person is more competitive than you, like they're going to get on you
Hmm.
because they're just passionate about winning this drill or whatever. So, I've tried to kind of spin it like that to where it's not like, oh my gosh, she's so mean or she's such a bee or whatever. Like, no, we're just passionate about what's happening and taking this serious. So,
Hmm.
um, for me, I wish I would have thought about that when I was playing, but like, I probably was probably one of the bigger, more passionate people, I guess you could say. Cause I would get in people, just like, let's go. Like, I'm not trying to lose. So,
Hmm. And I
um,
think it's like when you have your teammates who do it, hopefully your culture as a program is strong enough that they understand it's coming from a point of like caring
yeah,
and like it's because I care. I want to push you to get better. Like I
yeah.
want you to improve because it's going to help our team. It's going to help you. It's going to help me. And I think that if you can create that culture where like players are pushing each other as hard as they can and really like trying to get the best out of each other, it makes your practices better and then it makes games just a little bit easier because then your practices are like super competitive in a good way.
Yeah,
And then like they just they're up for it, you know,
yeah,
they're always
yeah,
competitive, they're always like
yeah.
ready to go and everything. And yeah, like I've told my players, I have a couple players who in the past who get like really like down or whatever the case may be because of the way that like their teammate acts, and I'm like, well,
Mhm.
look at the way that you guys act before and after practice. You guys are happy and friends, like
Yes, yes,
everything's cool. It's
yeah,
just things are a little bit
exactly.
different here on the court, like that's
Right.
all. Like, so
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this next one I thought was interesting, because I wonder. I feel like it's a rule thing. That's what I thought of. But about how do you avoid rolling your ankle on a defender's feet when you land from a jumper? So my first thought before I have you answer was like, as a shooter, you need a space to land. Like that unless I'm completely mistaken, I don't think this is like a state by state basis.
Yeah.
You need to have a space to land. That's part of like your shot. And so that was my first thing I thought of, but I want you to go ahead and answer that first.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, in a game situation, here in Indiana, if you shoot and the person that's guarding you, doesn't give you that space, that's a blocking foul.
Hmm.
So, from that kind of standpoint, it's a foul if they don't give you that space to land.
Yeah, that was the
Um,
thing that tore, I think, like Kobe Bryant's Achilles or something because he didn't have a space to land. I think he landed on somebody's foot, and then
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But I guess also like on the flip side of that, as a shooter, like you shouldn't be worried about rolling your ankle.
Hmm.
When you're going up for a shot, I guess. I don't know. I never thought about those types of things. Of course, then you're like, gosh, dang it, why didn't I pay attention to like where their feet were or what was happening? Um, but also, um, if somebody closes out to you that close, go buy them.
Hmm.
Like don't, I mean, sure, they might be closing out at you late, but for me as a shooter, the last thing that was on my mind was if I come down on this person's foot, am I going to roll my ankle?
Hmm.
Because I think you're just kind of in the moment and you don't really think about it. But as
That's a good
you know,
point. That's a good point. Before I forget it, though, like
yeah,
if you have a player who's like defending you and they're getting that much in your space that you don't have room to close out, like, well, it's time to learn a head fake, kid. Like, we're gonna
yeah,
do a shot
yeah,
fake and we're just
yeah,
gonna see ya. Like, we're gonna go
right,
right by him. Keep going. But that's what
right,
I thought of.
exactly. But yeah, but and then it's going to be a foul if they don't let you land. At least here, I don't know what it is everywhere else.
I guess
But
it
I
depends on if it gets called, huh? If
yes,
people notice that you have,
exactly.
and well, to me, that's like, as a player, if you're noticing that, you should probably let somebody know. Like, there's a way
Yeah,
to talk to a ref or talk to your coach. Like, I don't have a space to land, and like,
right.
nothing's happening. And I think
Yeah,
it depends on your personal preference, coach. I don't know how you feel about like players like talking to refs or anything like that, but somebody should be notified if you feel like, hey, like
yeah.
I can't land safely, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't have a problem, if they would say, "Hey, sir, can you please watch so and so on my shot or defenders on my shot? Like they're not giving me, my plane to land or whatever." But
Hmm.
also like if one of my players came up to me, and was like, "I don't know what to do. Like I'm worried about rolling my ankle." I'm like, "Well, okay, well, worry about rolling your ankle when you roll your ankle. Like you can't have that mental block
Hmm.
of, okay, well, I can't shoot it because I'm afraid I'm going to land on this girl's ankle." So
Sure. Did you worry, or even as a player, even now as a coach, about like ankles? Did you ever have like ankle issues? I have really bad ankles. I never took care of them. But
yeah.
did you have that issue or no?
I rolled my ankle really bad in high school.
Mm,
I was actually playing volleyball, and came down on a girl's foot wrong. And at that, it was such a bad sprain that it should have, I would have been better off breaking it.
sure.
But I came back. I mean, it still bothers me every once in a while, but as far as injuries and stuff, I never had any injuries. Of course, I rolled ankles and tweaked ankles and stuff. Who
Yeah.
doesn't? But nothing
Hmm.
ever super serious. So
Right. I think that just a couple other points to just sort of add with that question. I think it is important to think about the way that you're coming down, not necessarily on a shot, but it is important. But especially for things like even like rebounds or layups, or like if you're in the boys' game and you're dunking, you've probably
mhm.
seen a lot of people get worried about a couple players. I think Joel Embiid's the one who like always comes down on like one leg after like they dunk. And
Yeah,
like putting all of that weight, especially for somebody like him, on one leg as opposed to like coming down on two, there is
yep,
something to be said about that. Like if everything is going down on one foot and you
mhm,
hit somebody's foot, that's different than if you have 2 feet that are landing,
yep,
because that's just different the way that I think the thing is transferred, or I don't know the
yep,
physics of it, but I mean there is something to be said about that, and definitely like take care of your ankles, and
right,
please take care of your ankles, tape them or roll them. But I will say over don't over tape them. There is, you could do
oh
too
yeah,
much.
oh
I was
yeah,
actually talking to a volleyball coach about that, and she was really concerned about the way that her players were like taping their ankles because it was like too tight. And she
yeah,
told her girls, she said, if your ankles don't give a little bit, then the next part of your body is going to go and give up in your leg, and that's going to be your knee. She said, and if
yeah,
it's your knee that's going to give, you're going to be in a lot worse trouble if it's your knee that goes than
yeah,
a sprained
absolutely,
ankle or something like
yep,
that. So,
yep. I
yeah,
had a
go ahead.
teammate in high school that rolled her ankle, and she had the big ankle braces,
Hmm.
and it actually broke her. I'm not good at anatomy, but it broke her leg
Tibula,
because
fibula, one of
yeah,
those.
one of the lower leg bones.
Something you don't
Like
want to have happen.
yeah, exactly. And I think too with, ankles and, knee injuries and things like that's how you're as a program, as a coach, as an athletic department or whatever, if you have, trainers and such, or like strength and conditioning
Hmm.
coaches, like that is your job in the off season to get their bodies ready for the season. So
Hmm.
that's another, yes, the girls need to do their own stuff too, but like you need to be doing agility and weights and stuff like that, so that their bodies are in shape and in condition for
Yeah.
beatings that they're about to endure.
Yeah. I had an episode about that. Those listening or watching, check it with Abby Gordon. She's a physical therapist, talking about those sort of things. And I think what we talked about in that episode, and I think it's really important for coaches to do as well, is like talk to whoever your, trainer is, or talk to those
Yeah,
people. Like if you don't know like how to rehabilitate something, or what the best way to stretch something is, or the recovery of it, like learn, like
yeah,
figure that
yeah,
out too.
yeah,
there's stuff with the anatomy and physical stuff I certainly don't know, but
Yeah.
I try not to pretend like I do. Ankles I kind of do just
Yeah.
because I know I have bad ones, but there's certain things like people talk about like different extensions or different things like hips or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know, like
Yeah.
hips do
Yeah.
this. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's something else that should be happening. And it's like, yeah, coach, they should be doing this, this, and this. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
yeah, definitely want to make sure that you try to learn about, especially anything, the lower body, especially when it comes
Yeah.
to basketball for sure. Um, I feel like every basketball player has an ankle injury or something that they can talk about.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so as I come from a player's perspective, I think this particular person was kind of like frustrated probably with a teammate and what was happening with their particular team. So what would you as a coach do with one of those guys or girls that hardly passes, but they're so good that letting them ISO or having them in one-on-one situations is actually the best way to score for the team? So I know I had a lot of alarms that went off in that question, but go ahead, coach. What do you do in that situation?
Um, well, you know, ultimately, like the goal in a game is to win the game. Um, and it doesn't matter how you really get there and who doesn't. So I've actually had to, we have a little point guard that, I mean, it is great off the bounce.
Mhm.
And, there are games when she is the only one that is effective. So there have been times where I'm like, everybody get out of the way. Somebody set a screen for her and she's going to drive. If at the time comes when, somebody steps over or whatever, then, be ready to knock down that shot. But like, until you're going to step up, until other people step up, like the ultimate goal is to win the game. So however we have to get there and whoever we have to, if there's only one person scoring or whatever, like, I don't know, like that's what we got to do. We got to do what we
Mhm.
got to do to win. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, that might be not right, but yeah, I don't know.
So like if I'm coaching a team and that's the situation that I have,
Mhm.
then I'm gonna look at those other players and be like, so like what are you doing here on this team? Like what is your
Yeah,
purpose? Like why do
yeah,
you exist here? Like
yeah,
like is
yeah,
this fun for you? Do you enjoy this? I get that you like winning, but like is this all it's gonna be for you? You're gonna look back at your high school career and be like, yep, I was there while
yeah,
so and so scored 35 a game.
yeah,
So to me, that's kind of my first thought. I would talk to a player like, how did we get to this situation? Like, how did I feel like, and I could be completely wrong because obviously there's like superstar players and everything, but I feel like if we're getting to that point, that I'm looking at the other players like, did you just like give up and like stop trying to
yeah,
get better? Like, are you doing anything anymore at that point? So
yeah.
that's kind of the first thing that I thought of. But then like from a coaching perspective, one of the things I would also think of is like, look, like if you're a player and you feel like you're in that situation, one, like obviously make sure that you like try and get better and like ask your coaches like, hey, what can I do, and so on and so forth. But I would
Mhm.
also tell that player like, if that's the situation, the teams that you play, if they are worth anything, they'll have scouted that and they will throw everything defensively at that player. They
Yes,
will throw, they'll do their box and one, they'll do effort, they'll double team that player every
yes,
single time. And so you
yes,
could almost tell that player, like, look, I get it, but any team that's worth anything is going to just throw five people at them. It won't
yes,
matter. And
yes,
then you'll be the one open. Then
absolutely.
what? Right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's kind of what I would tell. But but like
100%.
you said, like if we got to that point and this is what's working, like it's not that I'm not doing much as a coach at that point, but this
Yeah.
is what's happening. Have
Mhm.
you had like any situations where there's been a discrepancy at that level where it's like, well, this is our option, so this is what we're doing?
Yeah, and sometimes it varies based on the games. So like unfortunately, we have been very up and down.
Hmm.
One game will come out and I'm like, holy crap, this is the team that I knew we could be. And
Sure.
then the next game, nobody shows up and we don't look anything like the team that just took the floor a week ago.
Uh-huh.
Um, so it's been really hard to prepare and different things like that. So you know s- most of the we've had a couple games where we've had very even scoring, but most of the time we have one girl that might have 15 to 18 points and then everybody else just kind of has like 2.
Mm-hmm.
So in those situations, yeah, I kind of say, if she can get by her girl, know the personnel of the person guarding you. It shouldn't take you that long to figure it out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to ISO her because she's the only one that's scoring and she's got a hot hand. Especially if you have a shooter that's getting hot, you know, hopefully the players are not selfish and think, oh, well, I'm not going to pass her the ball because she's scoring, which, sometimes we do have that. But like, if the
Uh-huh.
player's hot, like, get on the ball. If they're scoring, get on the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then, like, kind of like what you said, I've told girls too, like, girl team scout, and all they got to do is shut down this person and this person. And like, if you take offense to that, that's the problem. Like, if you get mad and whatever, that's the problem. Like, you should take that as, okay, cool, shut them down. I'm going to show you, like, you're going to have to guard all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, we have had situations where we do have to ISO, and for me, I've told the girls from day one, like, I just want to win games. Great if so and so scores a lot of points, but at the end of the day, I want to try and win as many games as possible. So,
Yeah. And whether that's from, an offensive standpoint of like, well, this is what we're going to go with because this is the player in like an ISO situation can do what they can do. Or I know
mhm,
for me, I've been in a situation as a coach where coaching against a team like that, where I basically was like, I don't care who else gets the ball as
yeah,
long as she doesn't get the ball. I
yep,
don't care how many of you get on her and it looks awful, but
yeah,
it works because
yeah,
all of a sudden this player who never touches the ball, it's like they have it in their hands, like they never held the basketball. Like, oh, I've never had the ball
yeah,
before. What do I do? And like, well,
right,
this is what happens. And so it is what it is.
yeah,
I will say, just to kind of wrap that thought up, like if that does happen, you are going to become one dimensional really quickly. And I think unless you have, just all state, all country person on your team,
yeah,
you're probably going to get exposed, and there's only so far that you're probably going to get. But it's
yeah.
kind of fun to watch in the meantime, though. It's kind of fun to watch them work. Uh, okay, so this is actually funny because this kind of goes right with situation you've had. How can you tell if a player is practicing more than everyone else? They're not the best player, but they practice every day and they work harder than others. I would love to have a team of like 15 of them. But, coach, how do you tell? How can you identify that player?
Well, I mean, just like the example, like, they work harder than everybody else. So like, an example, we actually had a sophomore. She didn't play last year, but just from the few practices that we had at the beginning of the season, just our limited contact
Hmm.
things, we hadn't had tryouts or anything. Just because, I mean, she's skill wise, and I've told her, like, and I've said this in front of the team, so it's not like I'm saying anything different here. Like, she's not the most skilled person on the floor or in the gym, but she's going to outwork every single person, and that's why
Hmm.
she's going to make the team. um and kind of like you said, like, I would rather have 10 girls on my team that's going to work their butts off than 5 girls that are super skilled that are just going to do whatever the heck they want. um so I think it's obvious when you know girls are working harder than everybody else, especially in drills and stuff, because they're kind of buying into what you're doing. But then also they're holding everybody else accountable. They're kind of setting that expectation. As far as, you know, putting in more work, it's not like we turn the lights on and then we shut the lights off in the gym and we leave. Like, we see if kids are shooting in the gym, or, it's obvious if we say, tell so and so to work on something, and then the next day or within the next week you can see that, like, their shooting has vastly improved, or their rebounding has improved.
Sure.
So I think, as um coaches, that's our job to notice those things. So and I don't really remember what the question was.
Oh, just how do you notice that they're working harder and they're
Okay.
they're practicing more than everyone else? They're not the best player, but they're working
Yeah,
their butt off.
I mean, I think that's just, as coaches and assistant coaches, that's kind of our job to be able to recognize
Hmm.
those types of things. And, I think as a coach, if you stick to your standards and your morals and stuff, those are going to be the things that stick out to you versus, you know, just super skilled people,
Yeah.
I guess.
And I think if you're a player, hopefully you feel comfortable enough like having that conversation with your coach by
Yeah.
like saying like, like there's a way to word it for sure without sounding like whiny for a lack of a better
Right.
term, but
Yeah.
be like, hey, like what do you notice, or have you noticed anything like different or anything like that, or what can
Mhm.
I work on? I think that communication piece is like super helpful. It
Yep.
also kind of shows that you're like committed and you're dedicated and you want to get
Yep.
better. Just to add to that, I know for me, one of the things I can pick up on right away is if a player knows and uses some of like the language that like I use or the staff
Mhm.
uses, and
Mhm.
they know what those terms mean or they know what those words mean. So just as like a quick example, if I'm going over something with shooting and then and I go to like, all right, you're like elbows to your eyebrows or something like that, and a
Yeah.
player misses a shot, like, oh, oh, my elbows weren't up to my eyebrows. If you know that language, it's like, okay, I know you were paying attention to me. I know
Yeah.
that you know
Yeah.
what we were talking about. So I think it's little things like that, but I think, like you said, just sort of trust your coaches that they pick up on that and they know that.
Mhm.
And just to add on to that, I know that the way I know is I tell my players, like, if the only time you're practicing is when we're in this gym, like, we're in trouble. Like, if you're not working on, these other things on your own
Mhm.
time, or, whatever the case may be, I'll know, because nobody's getting better, because you're
Yeah.
not going to get better just in that like practice hour and a half. Like, you might learn something, but that doesn't mean you're
Yeah.
getting better. I just gave you some tools maybe to get better on your own time if you want to.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's it's almost like hard for some players, I think, to get that like practice isn't like your only practice. Like, practice is just
Right.
our structured,
Yes.
organized time. I mean,
Yep.
I'll let you speak on that really quick. Like, for you, when you were playing, like, you went to practice, but then like how much practice did you do afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, like, we would shoot in our driveway. But then also, we were staying after practice to get more shots up. You were shooting before practice started. And then also, like, our coach, we would have like morning shooting. So you would come in at, 7:30 before
Mm-hmm.
school and, shoot on the gun. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things I tell my girls now, there was this, a lot of them they're very streaky shooters. So it was kind of early in the season, and we were in practice and they were missing shots, missing shots, missing shots. And I was like, why do you get so mad? Why do you get so mad when you miss a shot? They're like, I don't know. I should make it. I'm like, why do you expect to make it when you don't put in the time to make the shot? So that's, or now, if they're missing shots in games and stuff, that's kind of what I go back to is like, why do you expect to make that shot when you don't shoot that? Like we can we'll try to get as many shots up in practice as we can. But unfortunately, we can't spend an entire practice shooting. So, like, if you're not going to put in some extra time or take advantage of, coach always gets here like an hour before everything and, stays late. If you're not taking advantage of that, you should not expect to make those shots. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's just kind of how I word it. Like if you're not going to
Mm-hmm.
put in the time, the expectation should not be that you expect yourself to make those because you're not preparing to make those.
Yeah,
So,
no, I 100% agree with that. And also to add on to it, it kind of goes for a body language thing for me, because that's
yeah.
actually a pet peeve of mine. Because if you miss a shot, even if you're just shooting around and you get like frustrated, then like, no,
Mhm.
we're done. Like, you can't mentally,
Yeah.
no, like, we got to get
Yeah.
rid of that, because what
Yeah.
does that look like in a game then? Like, how are you
Yeah.
going to react? Are you just going to give up a foul and just be angry? Like,
Right. Exactly.
I tell my players, like, for me, if I'm shooting around, and they laugh at me, but I mean it. Like, every shot that I take, I'm going to make it. Like, that's my mentality when I shoot. And if
Absolutely.
I miss, like, oh well, I'm gonna make the next one, so
Yeah.
whatever. And
Yeah.
they laugh, and I'm like, no, like, that should be your mentality, because
Yes.
if it isn't, then what are you doing?
Yes.
But then
Yeah.
that goes with what you said. Like, did you even put the work to even like get to that point? And I kind of joke with my players, like, you don't even know, for me, and I didn't even like play at too much of an organized level, how much work I put in just like for my own shot, and I'm just whatever now. But
Hmm.
I put in a certain amount of hours to even get to that point. Like, if, like you said, like, you can't even be close to upset if you're just shooting nonchalantly, or if you're not
Yeah.
even shooting like correctly, or you're just like throwing up shots you would never do in a game. Like, there's a
Yeah.
lot that goes into that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. That was just funny you mentioned that because that's such a pet peeve of mine is people's body language after they miss a
Oh yeah.
shot. It's like, why?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
what are you doing?
Right.
Even
Right.
NBA shooters like are going to shoot like 45, 50% even. It's like, yeah, that
Exactly.
happens. Right.
Exactly.
So this kind of kind of transfers right into this idea of this is a player who's on JV and they're worried that they're going to lose their spot on JV. In
Mhm.
practice, they play really well, but they don't play well in games. So, how what tips would you give for a player to like transfer what they do in practice to games?
Okay. First off,
Uh oh, here we
um,
go.
I know might be a rant.
I'm ready for it. That's what we're
The
here for.
starting thing for me, I don't get it. Maybe it's because I started, but like, and I've tried to tell my girls all the time because, for me, my starting lineup changes weekly. Like, because I'm going to put 5 people on the floor that have played well, maybe they practiced well and,
Hmm.
deserve it, whatever. However, like, what does that do? Like, what does a starting position do? I personally would rather be, I would rather end the game on the floor. Like, I
I've
want
heard
to be.
this. Yep, yep. I've heard this
Yeah,
before.
like, that just like struck a nerve with me because I'm like, okay, great. If you want your name to be called, that's what we do for seniors on senior night that don't play. Like we that all the seniors start, we jump, we
Yep.
call a timeout, and we sub them out. Like if that's, I've told the girls this too. Like if that's what you want, if all you want and care about is to start the game, perfect. I'll have a sub at the scores table for you and you'll be the first sub. If that's all you care about, we'll get you your starting spot. But if that's all you're worried about, you're not going to play. Because, I would think that you would rather want to be the person that that we have to have on the floor at the end of the game. Like, who cares who starts the game, really? Anyways, but as far as, translating from practice to games, like that's on you, I think, as a player, to take that. And Kara Lawson had another good quote about it. It's how you're preparing and focusing. She called it, I think she said something about focus, like from practice to a game, like that's how you focus and how you are prepared, and how we know you're prepared for the game lets us know like if you are focused. So I really think it's, are you engaged and are you focused in practice to where, you know, you can translate those things into a game? And are you focused on those leading up to the game? Are you focused in the game on different things? So I think that is on the player, just really to kind of lock into, what's expected, what you went over in practice. And as coaches, we don't just do drills in practice just to do drills and take up
Mm.
time, right? Like, we're doing these things to hopefully translate something into the game. It doesn't necessarily have to be this big thing, but maybe it's yelling shot every time a shot goes up or whatever it is. But I think it's, to be able to, um, translate those things from practice to a game, like that's your focus and your preparation as a player, to make sure that you do those things like
Sure.
that.
I think in practice, I think it's a pitfall that players can fall into where they're doing well in practice and doesn't quite translate into games. And so my first thought with that question is, how are you treating practice? Like, are you treating practice like it's a game? Like,
Mhm.
are you like completely locked in? Are you completely focused? Are you going to look like that crazy person who's like going after your teammate and like going after it like 100%? Like,
Yeah.
are you keeping that same mentality? Because if not, then I don't know if what you're doing in practice is even really able to translate into games.
Yeah.
If your mindset and the way that you approach it is a different mentality than it is in a games, of course it doesn't translate because it's like they're two completely different things if mentally that's how you treat them, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
but if you go into practice like, I'm here to compete, I'm here to like win in whatever sense of the word that means to you, and you have that attitude, then games are just another extension of that, and they're just another opportunity for you to do that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I think. And then my other thought with that question is, and it really is dependent on like what this player is doing like in their practices and everything. But like you can do well in drills depending on what your coach does, but like how well do you like know the offense? Like how
Yeah.
well do you know what your press is or what your press breaker is and like what to do in these situations? Like I think players can do really well with structured drills where they know exactly where they're going or exactly what they're doing or the purpose of that drill. But
Yeah.
as we know, that games, there's all these split second decisions you have to make, and you have to
Yeah.
like react, and you have to know like what to do here, and like, oh, like, okay, here's this ball screen. Okay, was like all these decisions have to be made on a mental level. And I think that at least what I've noticed is that, players, they struggle with that is when you take away almost the structure of like a
Yeah.
practice environment and you throw in all these different variables like math. It's like,
Yes.
I wasn't ready for this because we didn't
Yeah.
simulate this. And then like you and I as coaches, like, well, I can't simulate every single
Everything.
possible
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
It's just your ability to like kind of act and react. And so um I, I don't know. That's kind of my thought. I think maybe even at that point, you almost have to have a conversation with your coach. And I feel like, and you could speak to this too. I feel like as a coach, you should probably recognize that, like, wow, this player does like super, super well in practice and does these drills really well. But then I throw them on the court, and it's like they've never held a basketball in their life. Like,
Yes.
what? Like something's happening here, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
something has to
Yeah.
be taking place for sure.
Right. Like what's going through your head, or talk me through when you see the game like situations and things like that. So yeah, I definitely agree with that for sure.
And as a final thought to that, for coaches to think about, not to make coaches seem like the bad guy, but as coaches, got to think about ourselves too. As a coach, are you creating an environment where players feel like they're going to get pulled for like a mistake, or they're going to be ripped a new one like if they do
Yeah.
something wrong? Like, are you going to berate them if in front of everybody if they make a turnover? Because
Yeah.
if that happens, as a player, like I can definitely see why like you freeze or you hesitate or like you just don't feel comfortable because it's like, well, now I'm getting pulled because of this one
Yeah.
turnover I did. So
Yeah.
I just think as coaches, it's always important just to kind of reflect a little bit. And
Yeah.
that's why I told somebody this. We're having a conversation. Like if you if you as a coach have never actually watched game film and the only thing that you do is just watch yourself, you should do that. Like just watch yourself on film and the way you
Yeah.
act and react to everything.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's good, but I know in my experience, I'm like, oh no, is that what everyone else sees?
Yeah.
Oh
Right.
man, is that how I act? And yeah,
Yeah. And
nope.
then kind of going on
Mhm.
with that as well, like as a coach, you should also look at your practice plan, and are
Mhm.
you doing drills and situations in practice that are preparing your girls for, and I know it's a JV player, but like are you putting them in situations where they have to where it's a game situation, are those things that you're doing, or is your entire practice just straight drill after drill, like they know exactly what's happening, what's expected, blah blah blah, to where whenever they get into game situations they actually really aren't prepared. So also as a coach you kind of have to look at what's your practice look like, from drill to drill.
And one of the things I had to sort of get away from, I know for me as a coach, is kind of get away from all of those as many drills, because what ended up happening was like I did it that way because it made my practices look better
Yes. Yeah.
because they're structured and these drills are going really well. Like everything looks good,
Yeah.
but I think it needs to be messy. Like it needs to get
Yeah.
like a little bit hectic and a little bit
Yeah.
ugly, because that's really where like the teaching is taking place.
Yeah.
All this like chaos and people looking confused. And for me, like I'd rather, I guess, you look confused now than look confused
Yeah.
during a
Yeah.
game, right? I'd
Absolutely.
rather
Yeah,
you
for sure.
not know what's going on. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a little bit of a tough situation at first because it looks crazy. But as
Yeah.
somebody told me once, I don't want to coach a team that knows 2 + 2 = 4, but then stares at me when I ask what 1 + 3 is because they
Yeah.
don't like it can't
Yeah.
differentiate it all, or they can't do that. So
Yeah. I
yeah,
like
for sure. All right, so this next one here, only a couple left. This next one here, again, I had some definitely alarms that kind of went in my mind, and this is from a player's perspective where they keep getting the ball stolen while driving in, and then they specify they're driving in fast. So I guess they're like they play a little bit of point, also a shooting guard, but they're worried that they always get the ball stolen when they drive in. So for I guess I'll start from you. You can go as a player's perspective and as a coach's perspective. Like, what do you think is happening in this situation? What advice would you give if this is happening?
Well, as a coach, I would say chill, like take a breath maybe before you drive in fast. To me, that kind of sounds like you're out of control. Um, but really just um, kind of slow down. You know, you, I tell the girls all the time, like, why are you driving into like four different defenders or down the middle or whatever? But I would just, big thing would, take a breath. I know you can't like think about all those things, but like just slow down, see what's happening. And on the other side of that, you might have to just get better at ball handling.
Hmm.
You know, and it might not be just, stationary ball handling. You might have to say, hey, so and so, will you guard me real quick? I want to get better at ball handling. So we do a lot of stuff where we'll not necessarily zigzag, but we'll do like one-on-one, and it's just straight ball handling. And we are still like, we're up in them, probably fouling. But we want to get up in people and make people better at ball handling.
Sure.
Post players too. So I would say the big thing would just be to slow down, take a breath, see what you have, um, and don't be so out of control. But then also like, get better at ball handling. If you are driving fast or dribbling fast, if you're a quick person, you got to get your ball handling up with the speed of your feet. So
Hmm.
I would say chill, take a breath, see what you have, and then you might have to put in some extra work on your ball handling.
I think that's the biggest one is you just got to work on your ball handling. I mean, they
Mhm,
specified that they maybe are like a light point guard. They don't play point guard a lot, and maybe there's a
mhm.
reason for that. I don't want to be mean, but maybe there's a reason why you don't play point guard a
Absolutely.
lot. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, probably got to dribble more. My other thoughts were, and I don't know because I haven't seen film on this player, so I don't know specifically. But my first
Mhm.
thought was you can only dribble one way. You're only going one way with the ball, and so like okay, you
Mhm.
can only go right. All right. So I know, okay, you're here, you're going to drive here. All right, I'll just take the ball from you here. Easy,
Yep.
we're done. The second thing is this particular player, I think, well, you drive and I know what you're going to do. You're going to try and force a shot every time. So okay, I can
Yeah.
just take the ball. You're not looking to pass out, you're not looking to jump stop, you're not looking to do anything.
Yeah.
Once you drive, it's a black hole and you're just going and all right,
Yeah.
well, I'll just steal the ball from you then. Like that's not a problem at all.
Exactly.
So it's to me like that's a big thing, and I think a lot of players don't realize how easy it is to like become predictable like with their body language. Like
Mhm.
i've
Mhm.
I've seen some very interesting on film, not even on my team, but of other teams I've played. I've seen some very interesting head fakes before where I go to my players like, if you ever bite on this, like I don't
Yeah.
know, we're shutting the program down because like
Yes.
nobody like they I can
Yes.
think of these in my mind, but there's certain maneuvers or moves where it's like I know what you're gonna do. Like you might think you're
Right.
doing this, but no,
Yeah.
you're always gonna drive. Oh, you look at the basket once and yep, you always do. Like
Yeah.
I think it's hard because players think that oh, I got all these moves and I got all this stuff. Like no, you don't really.
Really. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that
That's
came
one
to
of the
mind
things.
too.
Yeah. That's what I tell my girls all the time. Like, after a week of watching them practice, I had a scouting report on every single one of them. And until they become more versatile, like we're the easiest, predictable, most predictable team to guard because, we're not working on, and again, that I had to take a step back and be like, okay, well, like, how am I making them better individually as well? Um, but also like you got to understand if you're not versatile, you're not going to get open against, good
Mhm.
teams and stuff because they're going to be prepared for everything that you do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think just as like a final thought for that particular player, one of the things I would probably ask them is like, well, do you know like what defense you're up against? Like, do you know
Yeah.
like what they're
Yeah.
trying to do? Like, if you're driving in, the ball gets stolen and they're like running a pack line, it's like, well, do you know what they're trying to avoid happening when like
Yeah.
I think that that's really important and is getting the players to like understand like okay this is the defense that they're running but like why like what are they giving up and what are they not
Yeah.
going to give up so yeah, it's going to keep getting stolen because that's the thing that they're going to absolutely make sure is nobody gets inside, nobody drives
Yeah.
on them. Like they'll let you shoot, sure, because you can't shoot. I don't know this player, but
Yes.
like sure,
Yeah.
but they're going to make sure maybe you're a good finisher and you're a good driver, so they're going to collapse on you, and it's going to happen every single time. And so in some
Yeah.
cases it might be like you need to like get a jump shot, and maybe the ball won't get stolen as much from you because now you can
Right.
shoot, and now they got to respect that, and there's so many
Yeah.
different parts to it too. And so hopefully for that player too, it's just like, well, ask your coach too. I hope they know. I hope they notice as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, if I know, I mean, you know too, if a player just keeps driving in and the ball keeps getting turned over, we're gonna have a conversation. We're gonna talk
Absolutely.
about that at
Probably
some
more
point.
than one.
I don't know how many in a row, coach, you're gonna let go before you have a conversation, but
Yeah, not
won't be
many.
too many for me. And so this last one, I like how some of these questions kind of all tie into each other. So I think this last one is definitely like relevant for these quarantine related purposes, but also just in general. So thinking about ball handling specifically, are there any like routines or anything that you'd recommend for somebody um, is a beginner, somebody who's maybe just looking to improve, like if it's just in the driveway by themselves, or maybe just at home, or maybe they just don't have access to a gym. So this particular player says, I'm trying to improve ball handling by practicing every day, but so far I can only do a basic crossover, so I'm pretty much at a beginner. So players, what they can do specifically with ball handling, if all they have are just their home and maybe I'll give them the sidewalk to use as well. What
Yeah.
would you recommend for them?
Well, one thing I did when I was younger, I'm right-handed, and obviously I knew I needed to be able to dribble with my left hand. So one thing I did for probably like a week straight, and it might take longer, it might take not take as long.
Hmm.
I did everything left-handed. I ate left-handed. Talked on the phone left-handed. Obviously you're in school, so I get like you probably don't want to do your assignments left-handed, but like right now some of you are virtual, but like I did everything left-handed so I could familiarize myself and be comfortable using my left hand. Because like now some, even my high school players, they can't hardly dribble with their left hand. So that's one of the big things where I would start as a beginner is get familiar with both hands. Obviously you don't have to be like shooting jumpers both hands, but like familiarize yourself with both
Sure.
hands. So doing something for a week with your offhand, I would say, is the big thing. And then when I worked at the Larry Hughes Basketball Academy, we always started with some ball handling stuff. So it was called pre-practice. We called it hips. So you'd stay low and you do your crossover. So we did, I don't know how many crossovers we did, maybe 10 each side, or 10 to whatever. And it's your low, and it's very specific, very picky. You're low, but the crossover is below your knees. So
Yep.
once you
Yeah.
did
Yeah. Yeah.
that, yeah, then you would go, we called them push pulls. You'd put, your left leg out front, your right leg back, and you'd push it and you'd pull it, and that's
Hmm.
low. You go the right side, left side. And even in the front, you'd go, from side to side. So one hand, right to left with one hand, and that's below your knees. And then we did hips. We would go, it was between the legs, but we called it hips. I don't know why, it was just the verbiage. But we go pound dribbles. Actually, we started with pound dribbles. So as hard as you possibly can, pound the ball 10 times on each hand. And then your hips, you would pound, and then between. So you were square, and then you'd split, and then you go between, and then back square. So like I always tell the girls when I introduce that, like you're square, you split, square, and then just kind of get your footwork going, and then now all you're doing is just adding the ball in between that split.
Hmm.
And then you just go behind the back. And even for me, so I was never like a flashy, showy point guard. I rarely went between the legs. I never went behind the back. Like I just wasn't super comfortable with ball handling skills. So, but I was quicker than everybody. So I didn't need
Yeah.
like a bunch of moves. But when I would do this pre-practice stuff with the kids, like I got better at ball handling just from doing that like 3-4 times a week, with
Mhm.
the students. So now when I'm playing against my players, like I'm like, dang, I wish I would have done this when I was in college, because like I can, like, it's pretty good. Um, but for like that was just a confidence thing. So like obviously the more repetitions you can get as a point guard or with ball handling in general, with anything, is repetitions.
Yeah.
Not like they have a lot of time in the world right now. So just be repetitive and get a lot of uh I don't know. I don't, repetitions. I don't know what I had a different word for that, but
Yeah, yeah. No, I get. I think I'm in the same boat. Like my thought is just dribble. Can you dribble with your left hand? And can you dribble with your right hand? If you can do that, like we're pretty much set.
yeah,
Because beyond that, how much of this like behind the back crossover like break somebody's ankles, like how much of that are you going to be actually be doing?
exactly,
Like if I'm
exactly.
coaching a somewhat decent offense, unless I just have one player, like that previous question, like
Yeah.
we're going to be moving the ball a little bit more. Like I don't need the ball dribbling this much. And
Yes.
so for
Yep.
me it's like can you just dribble with your left hand, and can you dribble with your right hand? And like what you mentioned, like can you just pound the ball? And
Yeah.
however hard you think you're pounding the ball, pound it 10 times harder than that.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
get the ball back in your hands as quickly as possible. I tell my girls, like, I want the ball not in your hands for as little as time as possible. So you
Yeah.
need to just smash the floor so
Yes.
that ball gets
Yeah.
right back into your hand. And
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing. I think that this isn't meant to get too ranty, but it's very easy to get like glossy eyed over all this like and one mixtape stuff you're gonna
Mhm.
see, like AAU type highlight things. But
Yep.
like
Yep.
I just want you to finish with your left hand and like drive
Yeah.
with your left hand when
Yeah.
you're
Don't get
open,
by
or
people. Yeah.
please or
Yeah.
finish. Yeah, like like that's really what I need. Because how many teams do you play against, or even scout against, where all you have to do is just tell the girls, like, just make them go the other way. And like, all right,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
they're done. Can't do
Yes.
anything anymore. And it's like,
Exactly.
it's almost disheartening for me as a coach to think like it could be that simple. But I think it's, I don't even know if it's a lost art, because I don't know if it was ever better where players could go with both hands.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
just learn how to do it with both. Like just make your, like you said, make your offhand, make it your dominant hand, and
Hmm.
just you do it, and just pound the ball as hard as you
Yeah.
can. I remember that there was a girl who I coached even in middle school a few years ago, and she was real strong with her right hand, and she was okay to good with her left hand. And in games, she would start with her left hand, and they would try to
Yeah.
take that away from her. And she's like, okay, and
Yeah.
then just went right to her strong hand. And so, but it's amazing just how one dimensional. I feel like, I don't want to speak out of a turn, but I feel like coaches who coach girls say that that's more of an issue than ones who coach guys. But I'm sure
Yeah.
it's in both areas where,
Yeah. I
and you
would.
talked about that too. You have like seniors even who it's like left-handed layup, or like,
Yes. Yeah.
like why
Yeah.
can you do all this other stuff? Why do you have a skills trainer? And why can't you do a left-handed layup?
Yes.
Uh,
Preach.
so
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. And I but what that leads to though is I think dribbling is one of those things though. If that's what you're focusing on, left hand, right hand, that's probably one of the easiest things to do on your own time. You
Yeah.
can, if
All
you
handing the
could
ball.
ball and go somewhere you're not going to annoy your parents, or
Yeah.
or when they're
Yeah.
not home, or
Right.
sidewalk cement, like you can figure that out, and you
Yeah.
scroll on Instagram, just pound the ball with your left hand, do something.
Yes. Yes.
um and I think that, just to kind of wrap up that thought, I think that that's one of the things that as a player you almost have to get kind of comfortable with, is doing things that others might think are weird. So if
Yep.
that's like going to school and you're just pounding a basketball the whole time that you're going to school because that's what you need to get more reps in, people might look at you weird. But what would you rather have? Like people look at you weird, or not play, or not have
Yeah.
that happen?
Yeah.
So
Right.
you know
Yeah.
I think that that's for sure. But I get it. Teenagers, a lot of self-consciousness, and for us
Yeah.
as adults, we're like, oh, just get over it.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
it is
Yeah.
what it
For
is.
sure.
All
Yeah.
right,
Definitely.
well, 10 questions, we got through them all, and this was fun. So coach, I want to thank you for spending some time. I'm so excited you have games to coach and things that you get to do. I don't know if I'm really excited for the practice that you had today, but excited to have
Yeah.
another opportunity tomorrow, and hopefully they don't get kicked out of the gym tomorrow.
Yeah, let's hope. Let's
Let's
hope.
hope.
Yeah, but I
Well, Coach
appreciate you
Gliebe,
having
thanks a lot. This was fun. So thank you. And thank you for all who submitted questions. Thank you for taking the time to watch this or listen to this. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much. Take care.